Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. No one is beyond help. No one is beyond hope. Nothing said on the Low Carb MD Podcast is medical advice. Please consult your own doctor before making any lifestyle changes.
Welcome to the Low Carb MD Podcast. I am so excited. We're going to have an amazing guest today. You may have caught her on another podcast. You may, which is the Life's Best Medicine podcast. You may have seen her online on X. You also may have seen her amazing story of over 100-pound weight loss, and she's kept it off for nearly 10 years. I'm super excited to have on today Christine Trimpe, who is an author, a speaker, and she's shared a lot about her journey over the years that I followed on social media. She's battled fatty liver, prediabetes, sleep apnea, and PCOS. And she's also somebody who's shared how important faith is and is a part of her journey. So I'm just excited to have you here. I'm excited to finally meet you. And she has a new book out. We'll put it in the show notes. And I heard the person who wrote your foreword. I heard he's a decent guy. I heard he's a decent guy. Dr. Brian
cool.
Lenskis wrote the foreword, so
Yes,
it's
that's
nice
pretty
to have
exciting.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Tro. It's so nice to connect with you screen to screen for the first time.
Yeah, I'm nice. It's always nice to see people. I've rooted for you on social media for a long time, and certainly Brian mentioned him working on the foreword. But I think you picked the wrong Low Carb MD co-host to write it. I got to be honest. I'm
Okay.
partial to the other host.
Yeah. Well, I'll catch you the next time around, the next
No
book.
problem. We'll do the sequel.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure there's people out there who are listening to this who may not know anything about you. So maybe just start with, why nutrition was important, how you got free from sugar, how you approached sort of your health issues, and then maybe we can start there.
All right. Well, I love the mountains. I was born in the Allegheny Mountains of Western Pennsylvania. And so I'll start with my mountain story, which is one of my favorite stories. About 10 years ago now, I went to Colorado with my husband to visit Rocky Mountain National Park. And it was the first time I got my husband out of the state of Michigan. So that was super exciting. But we went to this park and he had planned quite a few hikes. We hiked around Bear Lake for anybody that's been there. It's probably the most popular stop at Rocky Mountain National Park. The hike around Bear Lake is about a mile and it's fairly flat. So I was feeling really accomplished about doing that. And then my husband said, let's go over to Nymph Lake. So I get over to the trail marker and it's at a half a mile. And I was like, oh, I could do a half mile. But I looked straight up and I knew I was in trouble, but I wanted to give it my best effort. And then, really, what happened on the way up that path is I did not make it to Nymph Lake. I ended up gasping for air in the Colorado altitude as well, too, was holding me back a little bit. But let's be honest, what was really holding me back was that season in my life, that time in my life, which had been a 30-year season of my life. I was morbidly obese. I was a little over 100 pounds overweight, and I had mounting chronic health issues that were just weighing me down, and not just weighing me down physically, but weighing me down emotionally, weighing me down spiritually. And so as I sat on the side of that mountain in the beautiful Colorado, unable to hike, I honestly couldn't climb over any circumstances in my life. And I really had what I look back on now and I call it my take ownership moment. Because sitting on the side of that path all by myself on that stump, I remember just breathing out a prayer to God. Yes, I am a faith-based person. I remember saying, I just want to feel better. And I didn't say in that moment, like, I just need to lose this weight or I want to lose this weight, because after 30 years of yo-yo dieting, I had given up on the idea that I would ever live at a healthy weight. So I really just wanted to feel better, because at 48 years old at that time, I'm thinking, am I ever going to live to see my grandchildren? Am I going to be around? Am I going to be able to go on hikes with my husband? But yeah, looking back, that's really where my story began. And I'm very grateful, because in that moment of sitting there all by myself, beating myself up, I did have what I call like the take ownership, take back control. I knew that when I went home back to Michigan that I was going to do something to take back control of my health. And I did, got home to Michigan, and I finally scheduled that sleep study that I had been putting off for at least 10 years. And that's really that new resolve that was settled in my heart on the side of a mountain. That's where it all started.
I want to understand a little bit because a lot of people talk about this and we don't go back to those moments. You mentioned you're a faith-based person, but you also mentioned some emotional and spiritual sort of issues maybe that you didn't recognize or what was going on. I find it hard to believe you didn't want to be healthy 10 years ago. I find it hard, like I can't imagine if I talked to you right before you climbed that mountain and I asked you, like, hey, Christine, do you want to live a happy and healthy life? That you would have said, no, I'm just going to go eat donuts. So,
Right.
so what's going on back then, 10 years ago? What is this, that emotional and spiritual weight that maybe it's hard to talk about? What was that moment for you? Like, what did it feel like to be sick, the sick version of you?
Yeah, it felt pretty miserable. And I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And truly, the emotional and spiritual part of this journey have been the most difficult, but also the most impactful. Really, it's what has changed in my life dramatically. I am so grateful for the weight loss, losing 100 pounds and feeling better, having more energy, reversing all those chronic health issues that you mentioned at the onset. It's amazing to feel better, wake up and feel better every day. But I was carrying so much heavy baggage, a lot of emotional baggage from having years in my childhood of being chubby and being bullied, being made fun of, just always feeling like I never fit in anywhere. And I didn't physically fit into roller coaster seats. I almost didn't fit into airplane seats. But more importantly, part of what was really heavy on my heart all those years was like I never felt like I fit in, for example, in a group of women. Like if I walked into an event and there was a bunch of thin and trim, beautiful women, I always felt like all eyes were on me. And so carrying that around for decades was really it was destroying my emotional health. It was making me feel less than. And to be honest, it's not something I ever really talked about with anybody. I never even talked about it with my husband, like the depths of what I was feeling and how uncomfortable I was in my own skin. So you're right to focus in and key in on these things that we don't talk about very often. But it's now I'm so excited to be able to talk about this with women who were exactly like me, who I meet women every single day who don't want to go to that place, but we have to go to that space if we want to go on this healing journey for our body, mind, and our spiritual health.
So, you've been a person of faith, so, but you mentioned like this spiritual weight on you.
Hmm.
You talked about the emotional weight on you, feeling like you didn't fit in, feeling like, maybe there's something wrong, right? What was that spiritual, like where were you spiritually back then? It sounds like you've lifelong been a person of faith, right? It wasn't that moment that you found faith.
Right.
So what was that spiritual weight for you back then, before
Yeah,
you got on that mountain?
right. I was raised in a Christian home. I have a heritage of godly grandparents all the way, up to great grandparents, all of that. But what I call those years, I call them my weary weight loss wandering years, I lived life as a very casual Christian. So I had this heritage of faith. I had this foundation of faith. I would occasionally go to church to check off the list so that my parents or my grandparents wouldn't be disappointed that I wasn't taking my children to church. And so it was just like the thing to do because that's how I was raised. And it was very, you could call it apathetic. Like my spiritual life was very apathetic, and what I diagnose myself with now is like all this heavy weight that I was carrying. I call it the sugar shackles because I felt like I was shackled by so much because of my food behaviors, my sugar addiction behaviors, my physical health, and that was just weighing down on me. But it wasn't until I had that moment on that mountain, I really credit God for meeting me there. And without his strength, I don't think I would have been able to come home from that mountaintop experience, or not mountaintop. I didn't make it to the mountaintop then, but that mountain experience, and like really be able to do this. But when I got that sleep study, and when I came home with the CPAP machine, which is something I did not want to do, but it was the first medical intervention that I needed to start healing emotionally and spiritually, started waking up refreshed first thing every morning. And that's when my casual Christian years disappeared, because I started picking up my Bible every single day, and I haven't put it down since. And that's really where I found, finally, after 30 years of collecting dust on my nightstand, finally got there was the best guidebook that I needed all of this time to help me show up daily for not just my physical health, but more importantly, my emotional health, and most importantly, my spiritual health.
Yes, I'm trying to understand that you're on that mountain, and that moment in time, and the emotions, and the spiritual shift. Was it quick, or did it develop over time? I'm always curious to sort of, did that vision of health come to you very quickly? Has it evolved over time?
It took some time. Yes, it definitely was a step-by-step transition. But as I stepped out onto this journey, I felt like more empowered day by day, especially when I started eliminating the sugar from my way of eating. That just impacted me physically, psychologically, and I could look back and see, like, in the faith-based world, we talk about this as being like a sanctification journey. So it's not going to be something that happened for me overnight. There are stories of people who change overnight, and that's amazing. They have amazing testimonies. I love those testimonies. But for me, it is a daily showing up, and it's a daily surrender. And it's a daily of being willing to accept what we have to surrender. Some days there's going to be suffering, but I can also look back on my 30 years of my dieting failures and realize how much I was suffering through all of those years. But it also, it gave me the experience that I needed to be ready to have that moment on the side of the mountain where my life was about to change. I just had literally no idea how drastically it was going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you started, what did your diet look like, and what did your, exercise and sleep routine look like? And, how did that change over the coming years?
Yeah, so I was eating the typical standard American diet, which I had yo-yo dieted for so many years. So I can't even tell you how many times I signed up for Weight Watchers, medical weight loss clinic, all of the things. Dr. Tro, I even was in a hospital-based clinical program for 10 months where I drank nothing but protein shakes for 10 months, chocolate and vanilla. And it was awful. I did lose some weight, but when they reintroduced foods like whole wheat bread and whole wheat pasta and half a sweet potato, my weight started coming back. And even though I had not cheated once for 10 months and was following all of their advice, to have that weight start creeping back up it really crushed my soul. But so I had been trying all of these things for all of these years. And I would sign up for aerobics classes. I would, go to the gym. And that was so frustrating because I felt like I was doing all the right things. I felt like I was moving my body and eating less. And then, of course, everything in moderation was one of the biggest dietary mantras that failed me over and over again as someone who's carbohydrate and intolerant and it was actually addicted to sugar. So yes, I did try all of those things for all of those years. At the moment that I changed my way of eating when I came home from that trip, really started to have a lot of self-reflection on what am I eating? Because very shortly after I got home from that trip, I was also diagnosed with the fatty liver disease because I was having painful ovarian cysts. So my doctor ordered an ultrasound and that was discovered. And that was really the health issue that really piqued my interest and got me on this rabbit hole of trying to determine how did my liver get full of fat? And of course, then I really examined my diet, which was a typical standard American diet, filling up my plate, about 65% of carbohydrates, thinking even the foods I was eating were healthy because also at that time I was involved in the diabetes prevention program because I was pre-diabetic. So I thought I was doing all the right things.
Gosh, it's crazy how much time and effort. Like, people here, like I can't count the amount of times I went to Weight Watchers. People here, I went to medical weight loss clinics. I ate protein shakes, and they don't understand how much suffering that is. And I think we all want to just put that under the emotional rug and put that on the spiritual rug and but really what I think that means, and I want to take a hard left here because, a commentator recently on social media, which you brought to my attention, said that obesity is a moral failure, right? It's a moral failure. So, how would you describe all of those people that supposedly helped you but didn't? Did they have a moral failure?
Yeah.
Did they have a moral failure? All the diet people sold you diet pills and just the sort of get rich quick schemes. Like maybe there's no way to get rich quick. And maybe the moral failure, it's funny. I've been thinking a lot about this, and let me just give me a minute to take a left here. If you go back like 200 years, right? We're community-based people, or tribal community-based people, right? Really maybe before the advent of industrialization and sort of globalization. Meaning like, if you were going to the bakery again and again and again, and you're gaining weight, or you're going to the, local pub again and again and again, and you're drinking too much, at some point, somebody's going to see you there, family member, health, like it's a community, right? And the community is going to try to protect you, right? Because they know they value you as a community member and whatever else you do, they know your family, they know your. So there's some community to protect you from addictive things, whether it's alcohol, right? Like the bartender is going to cut you off, like, sorry, Harold, I can't keep giving you drinks, right? So, as a largely Judeo-Christian country, and like I think a community-based country, right? Like we would all look to sort of help our neighbors, right? But what happened over the last 100 years is the food industry has really like moved in. It's not home cooked meals, local places. It's not like you're going to a local pub that's brewing the alcohol and, it's seasonal or something like that. It's like 24/7, and there's a complete disconnect. Like you go to the supermarket, there's no community to protect you. You go to the liquor store, there's no community to protect you. Um, so I wonder if this idea that obesity is a moral failure is actually true.
Mm.
And it's a moral failure on the fact that we've moved away from protecting our neighbors and looking after our neighbors and looking after each other. Um, I think people want to make it like the moral failure of Christine. She's like,
Mhm.
she
Yeah,
had no morals on sitting on that mountain, going to Weight Watchers year after year after year, going to clinics year after year. They want to sort of blame you.
right.
Um, but I don't know. Like, am I off here to think that maybe the moral failure is we've moved away from families and communities that are there to help us, guide us, protect us, that mentorship. Like Christine, maybe you don't want to do that. Let's talk about this. What are you feeling? What are you doing? You know, what do you think? Is it the moral failure on the person because we're all, you know, or
Yeah.
is there something more here? And sorry if that topic is abstract, but I'm curious.
No, no, it's very abstract. It's not something I've ever thought of, but I definitely have some thoughts about it. I actually went down a rabbit hole last night about reading about moral proximity, and this like ties in specifically to what you're asking. I felt like for all of those years that it was my own personal moral failure. And that's why, that is something that really was another heavy weight of my emotions that I carried around, just walking around thinking that people are looking at you, people are talking about you, people are gossiping about you. And so I did take it very personally. Now, I do want to say that I'm so glad that I never got swept into or wrapped up into the obesity body positivity movement because I did, on some level, I knew that this was partly my responsibility. But one thing that really changed my life, Dr. Tro, is the day that I learned from a friend, we were having conversation over lunch about hormones and fasting. And she said, "Have you ever heard of this doctor, Jason Fung? He's in he's in Toronto. He wrote a book called The Obesity Code. Maybe you'd be interested in that." Because I was lamenting to her how I had quit sugar. But my weight loss was really slow because I was still eating a lot of sugar that I just wasn't aware of. And so I went home that night and I Googled hormones and fasting. I landed on a video series by Dr. Fung that was on the Diet Doctor website. And the thing that really changed my life was that when he looked in the camera and he said, "This is not your fault." And I was like, "What do you mean this is not my fault? I've been carrying around this obesity for 30 years. How can this not be my fault?" Right? And everybody was taking my money all those years. Everybody was taking my money to help me, but nothing was really helping me. So I was really intrigued by what he said. I continued to binge watch his videos and other things that I found on the Diet Doctor website that night. But what I walked away from that was like hope. Like, oh my goodness, somebody for the first time in my life is telling me this is not my fault. And he said that you've been given faulty advice all of these years. So what I walked away with was like, okay, this is not entirely my fault, but now it is my problem. And I have a responsibility to reverse course, take action. And that's exactly what I did with that brand new information that I was given about living a low carb lifestyle and with intermittent fasting. And so yeah, I really appreciate that he said that. It kind of relieved the guilt and the shame of all those years that I was carrying, thinking this was entirely my fault. And maybe it wasn't entirely my fault. Well, I know now better that I don't think it was entirely my fault, but I'm so glad that I took action and I took on the responsibility to fix it.
Yeah, I want to like talk about actually the body positivity movement because I think it has one good aspect, and I think it's being propagated by really pharma.
Mhm.
Um, the one excellent aspect is love yourself, no
Yes.
matter what body size you are.
Mm-hmm.
Really come to terms with the fact that you don't need to, nobody has the right or the ability to shame you, guilt you, make you feel bad, and that you deserve to feel good in your own skin, right? So I think that let's just call a spade a spade. They've done that in an amazing way, right? They've done that in an amazing way. I think the harms of this is because they are normalizing pathology,
Mm.
right? They're normal, like food addiction is not acceptable. People are really trapped and hurting. And
Yes.
the other half of it is just such a harmful message. And if you follow the money, the money for these largely comes from people who make money off of the misery cycle of obesity.
Mm.
So I'd be very cautious about that. But I think like the main part of the message, which is you deserve to feel good and no, not shame-free, guilt-free, and yes, it is a lot more complicated than just your willpower.
Yeah.
Um, I think, so I'm with you. I think that there's good and certainly some harm. But I think that part of the story that we're talking about now, which is there's a lot more, like we've normalized this, and unlike gambling where you can turn it off and abstain, and unlike alcohol where you can go abstinent, and unlike heroin and sex and porn and all these
Mhm.
other addictions where you can abstain, with food you can't,
Right. We
right?
have
Or
to
you
eat.
can't for long,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so it's a bit more complicated. You can't abstain. And so I think that I think if we, and that message is hard to give to people. Hey, you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with an addiction that you can't abstain from and you have to learn to live with.
Yes.
How hard is it to deliver that message probably every day? I know you're a coach, so
Yeah.
you're probably, and you have I mean, certainly I'm sure in the book you talk about this, but I'm sure with your clients you also talk about it as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's really hard. And then add on top of the layer about being a faith-based person and someone who's really drawn, like my passion is helping women in the church, bringing up the topic of gluttony too, and the food addictive behaviors, it drives the gluttony, and it's like a vicious cycle that we need to learn to break free from. We need to surrender. We need to like show up and do the work. But yeah, it's not a fun thing to talk about. I often wonder like why me? Why why do I get to go and talk about this issue? I'm sure you feel the same way some days, is to have those hard conversations with people. And yes, we have to eat. But I'm also very grateful for the training that I have been doing in sugar addiction, because I've learned so much. And everything that I learned, I'm like, yep, that was me. That was me. That was me. That's my experience. And someone on Twitter, or X, the other day said to me, well, you're the expert. And I said, I'm not an expert. I'm far from an expert, but I do have a ton of experience with this. So this is why I have a passion for helping women break free as well, too. But yeah, definitely something really difficult to talk about. But I love giving people hope, telling them that it is completely possible to quiet the obsession, to quiet the fixations, to quiet the noise of these strong cravings and desires that at one time I had for the hyper palatable food, for the highly addictive food. And all of that has just like been so quieted by choosing whole and wholesome food and letting food heal me. The food that I still have to eat when we make the wise choices for how we're fueling and nourishing our body, like that's the healing can take place.
Yeah, um, I think food addiction as it's just a concept is largely, and I'm just thinking about it being a faith-based person and the sort of the pressure of being gluttonous, how do you deal with that? And the quote unquote gluttonous. Um, I think that's a lot to unpack, but you know what the worst part is most of the people that I meet, when you ask them, like, do you even want to be eating this way? Do you feel good eating this? They'll answer no. They'll say no, they don't. Like they don't like the way it feels. They don't want to be doing it. It's not like they don't even want it. They want to get out of their lives. If it's certainly if you've talked to, it's any addiction. I think I think when it gets to addiction and you talk to people who suffer from addiction, nobody wants it, right?
Right.
They would give anything to get rid of it. Um, I remember talking to a patient of mine who, when I was in residency, had severe alcoholism, and I
Mm.
would admit him, I must have admitted him to the hospital. And get this, Christine, he was admitted to the hospital maybe 100 times in 3 years. He
Wow.
was homeless. He, you know, um, faced a lot of adversity, and he was seen by maybe over 100 people who gave an oath to do no harm and to help others. He was seen by hundreds of nurses, hundreds of doctors, hundreds of medical assistants, all who supposedly gave their lives to really help other people get healthy. And not one person could have affected him. He ended up passing away. And I remember when he passed away, I thought to myself, this hospital has spent millions of dollars caring for this person with addiction.
Mm.
And he has seen hundreds of people who supposedly wanted to actually help him. And I remember one of the last times I saw him, he was an alcoholic, he had decompensating liver issues, he was bleeding, he was stuporous and in the emergency room, and I saw him, he pulled me up, he grabbed me by my collars and says, Tro, I don't want to be doing this.
Mm.
When I walked out to discuss the case with the ER doctor and the ER nurse, and no fault of their own, this is what they said. They said, oh, he's back here again, but you know what? Our job's easy. At least we can use our notes that we made, our medical notes from the last time, like they were so apathetic, so disenfranchised with him. And here he was literally grabbing me by my collar saying, I don't want to drink ever again,
Mm.
And I just sat back and wondered to myself, you know, did that shame and guilt, did it help him? And did the people around him, look at what happened. There's a whole hospital here, Christine, hundreds of people who supposedly want to heal and help, millions of dollars that were sent to him. Like, imagine I saw him 5 years ago. I was like, here you go. Here's $5 million.
Mm.
Go fix your life. Like, go on an island somewhere, right? Like, imagine if we took all those resources and actually tried to help him. And instead, what we ended up with was him dying, desperately wanting to stop, and people so apathetic and uncaring that they had no chance of helping him.
Mm.
So when you're dealing with addiction, like how do you break in a meaningful way? How do you, because the patients themselves, the people are disenfranchised. All the people around them, they're done. So
Ugh.
how do you break free? How do you break in?
That's really shocking and sad story, but I think it's like what was missing was something connecting with his soul. And I have found that the women that show up and will go on this journey with me and do the hard work, something has touched their soul, either a health scare or a person that shows up and is deeply concerned about them and is willing to go on this hard journey with them. stories, sharing stories of experience. And another thing that I found that's really powerful is to help women break free and start moving forward in the right direction is a community of women that are just like them. Like, I am so privileged and honored to be able to show up every day to literally help old Christine. Like, that's how God is bringing these women into my life. They are old Christine, and that kind of puts a little bit of tears in my eyes to think about it. But really, when we get each other, when we understand each other on like this very empathetic level, I think that's why, you know, we all are uniquely created with these gifts that God gives us and how we can show up to help people. I happen to believe that I've been given the gift of exhortation, which is encouragement and the ability to challenge people to show up for their health and their spiritual health, their emotional health, all of those things. So I really think that there has to be that connection there. And you sound like in that situation, you are compassionate with that person. And that's what we need. We need compassionate people to be showing up to help these people break free in their own journeys of addiction.
Who would be compassionate if it's their moral failure?
Right. Yeah.
Which is what Matt Walsh says, you know?
Yes, yeah, I don't think it's like their moral failure. Yes, I had a responsibility for my own personal health. I know as a person of faith that my body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. But I didn't really understand that truly for those 30 years that I lived very casually in my faith. I didn't understand exactly what that all meant. But now I know different, and that's why like I just want to say every day, like, you guys, this is really exciting. There is a way to treat your body well and to do it. And when you do it well and you show up every day and you have energy, you feel better. I always say when you feel better, you serve better. So if we can just get people to show up to the starting line and um, hold their hand, of course, we can't do the work for them, but I blow my coach's whistle every day in group coaching and like, come on, you can do this. We all need encouraging people in our lives.
Yeah. It's funny. We're talking about the failure. I'm going to tie this in. So I know I talk in tongues. So I have the same bug you have, which is being compassionate and being able to encourage, I think, simultaneously.
Mhm.
If you look, going back to this comment of community-based healing, right, which is really what the church is, in my opinion. But doctors also historically were religious figures. A lot of times they were very religious. And if you go back 100 years ago, the doctor was this local person,
Yeah.
right? So if he saw Christine, drinking at the bar, he would say something, right? If he saw, or he or she saw, right, something happening, he would do something, right? And he would also go to church with you. He would see you, at the store, right? The doctor was this, part of the community and could offer guidance, right? And that's completely gone,
Mm.
right? That's completely gone. There's no more community-based healing. And I think we are tribal, community-based people. And so I love the fact that you're creating this community, right, of like-minded women. You're using sort of, I think the churches around the country need to be protected. They are putting out donuts after mass and after service, which is, unforgivable in my opinion, and we need to do better. But I love the fact that you're creating this community and you're getting people together. That's fantastic. Can you tell me more about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, like, I do go against the grain in my leadership roles in these communities because, like, for example, I facilitate a life group, and I made it very clear to my life group people that we are not snacking at 7 o'clock at night. We don't have, there's no food at my life group. I'm doing a book signing on March 1st locally. There's not going to be any food there. Like it's in the middle of the afternoon. There's no reason to have food. So yes, like we can do little things like that, go against the grain a little bit and not worry about what people think about us either. But yeah, for my method, I call it the sugar-freed me method because like living without sugar, I hope people get the freed part of it. It is really all about the freedom. And the way my coaching philosophy, I have pillars of food. We talk about food, fasting, feelings, fitness, and it's all on a foundation of faith. And I make it fun. F is the last F is fun. We make it fun. So just gathering those women together, I have a program, like I have 13 weeks of modules that they go through. But more importantly, the most powerful part of what I'm doing, I really truly believe, is showing up in group coaching sessions with them weekly, making sure they show up, that I see their faces, that we talk about the hard things, we talk about the victories, we just talk about all the things, and that they know that there are not only just me, but there's other women that show up weekly in our Zoom calls that are feeling and experiencing the exact same thing. So there is so much power in group coaching. And of course, it takes time. So, we're typically together about 6 months. And then they are welcome to stick around because, again, this is a lifelong battle because, as you said, we have to eat. And there are moments of slips, there's relapses, and we need to do our best to prevent those from happening. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And I actually wrote the book called Sugar Freed: Stop Losing the Weight Loss Battle, Start Gaining the Victory. My book and my coaching program work hand in hand. And again, I just hope people get the message of the freed part in Sugar Freed because so much has changed in my life and the women that I have the privilege to coach, and hopefully the people that read my book, they can step up and show up and just take that first step to this life of freedom.
Absolutely. And where people can get the book on Amazon or your website, where should they go
Yep.
and get this?
Yeah, the book is available on Amazon, but I do have a website. They can learn more about everything I'm doing. It's just my name, ChristineTrimpe.com. There's a whole page on my website for the book, and there's a whole page on my website about the Sugar Freed Me Weight Loss Solution Program. So all the information is there, and I'm on social media pretty much on every platform with just my name.
Quick question. What
Yeah.
did you start eating 6 years? What did your diet look like 6 years ago? What does it look like now?
Okay, well, I tried to incorporate before. I would
Oh,
try
like
to,
when you just
yeah.
started, like a year
Yeah.
into, yeah.
Oh, okay. So my typical day, I'm very much lean, ketogenic still. Like I focus protein. I'm postmenopausal now, so I definitely want to focus on my protein. I've reduced my fats a little bit. I lost the weight with a typical ketogenic lifestyle, so a little bit, more healthy fats. But now I've kind of dialed back on the fats a little bit. Before that, I was just filling up my plate like, what did they call that plate? My plate, 60 to 65% carbs and like a fist size of protein. Now my protein intake is probably 2 to 3 fist sizes. I mean, that's how I'm filling up, is mostly with protein.
So mostly protein, very low carb, no sugar.
Yes. No sugar, right.
And then any one tip to give the person who's struggling out there, the one tip you wish you knew?
Yes, I wish that I knew um that shopping the perimeter of the grocery store is really safe. I used to hate grocery shopping. I used to hate meal planning. I'm really not a great cook, which is why you'll never see a cookbook from me unless my agent says something differently, but that's not in my plan. But yes, really, you can heal with whole and healthy foods. And it was really quite mind-blowing to me to wrap my brain around that when I first started going down this journey of eliminating sugar. And You can bust your sugar cravings. If you had told me that 10 years ago, I would not have believed you, but you can absolutely quiet that noise of sugar cravings.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon by going to lowcarbmd.com.